should we really have such a strong woman be a weak mayor?
When we think about the issue of unsheltered homelessness with just one piece of with just one kind of approach, it's really hard for us to expand our vision a little bit and recognize how everything is interconnected. There is a lot of reason for hope, and the reason for hope is right here in the community and the people that are here at this moment in time.
We ain't throwing starfish here, now we're having a good party. Talking about structural change. We believe the land is sacred, even beneath that vacant parking lot, where the weeds are doing their best to express the need for something different. Gonna make some space for you and me to live here all together. Gonna make it safe and fun for kids to get around the town. Gonna find me a residential pedestrian district where I can gracefully grow older. Gonna spend my remaining years sharing Boulder.
Hello, Boulder and the wider world. This is the Sharing Boulder podcast. My name is Philip Ogren, and for episode 35, I spoke with Nicole Speer, who is a member of Boulder's City Council and is running to be Boulder's first directly elected mayor this fall. We met at a park near her house in South Boulder and talked about a wide variety of subjects, including her new e-bike, homelessness in the camping ban, agrivoltaics, and why she is running for mayor, among others. In the episode, we loosely quoted a previous point-in-time count of people living in shelters, transitional housing, or are unsheltered, which was around 700. Since this interview was recorded, a new point-in-time count was released for the most recent survey conducted in January of 2023, which reported 839 people living in these conditions. I admire Nicole for her inclusive approach to leadership and her tenacious work to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion through both personal mentorship and policy positions. We hope you enjoy this interview with Nicole Speer. Nicole, welcome back to Sharing Boulder. You are our second alumnus on the show, so it's really an honor to have you. Go ahead and introduce yourself anyways.
Thank you, Philip. It is so wonderful to be here. I am Nicole Speer. I am a mom. I am a current city council person. I manage a research facility at CU Boulder, and I've been a longtime Boulder resident.
Great. And kind of most pertinent to this moment is you're running for mayor of Boulder.
Yes, I will, as of, or at least at the moment I'm planning to. I am waiting until the official opening date of campaign season, August 8th, to declare myself as a candidate once my paperwork and everything is signed. But yes, I am planning to run for mayor this fall.
We have some dogs barking. We actually braved some rain and thunder to get here, and then the sky cleared up, and now the dogs are out playing. So.
Yes, and we have a rainbow.
Yeah, we have a rainbow. No snakes yet.
No. Yes. No. Yep. That's. I'm okay with that.
Okay.
For a while.
Well, you told me something that I'm super excited about. You bought an e-bike recently. So
yes.
What did you get? And
yes.
How's it going?
Yeah, I have officially joined the ranks of e-bike riders, and this was something that many of my colleagues have been encouraging me to do for years. I was always of the opinion that if you were going to ride your bike, you really needed to earn your ride, and you really shouldn't get an extra assist. And then, realized.
I've had people wag their fingers at my e-bike before.
Yep. So, and then, I realized that it is a little bit faster to get around when you have an e-bike, and it does make it more possible, especially when you're juggling multiple jobs, family, all of that, to be able to fit in cycling as a mode of transportation. So it took me about 6 months to find one that I felt was right for me. I wanted to find one that resembled the style of the bike that my mom had when she was growing up in Luxembourg and was living in a really rural community. Her family did not have a car until she was in her late teens, early 20s. She, really grew up in a pretty poor family and area, and they used bikes to get around. They had bikes and they had the train. So she would bike to school, bike to her job, all of that. And it was this kind of cruiser style bike. And so that's what I was looking for. It needed to have a basket, and it was absolutely essential that it could be either pink or purple. So thanks to my colleague, Lauren Folkerts.
I was going to say, when you said my colleagues,
Yes.
quote unquote, I've been encouraging me. Like the person that came into my brain was Lauren. I bet she was, prodding you along. So,
Yes, yeah, and Matt Benjamin and Tara Weiner as well.
Nice.
We're all trying
Tara
to
got
get me into
a new
it.
e-bike recently too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's
So
great.
so I found one and have been using it to ride now, and it really is wonderful. It is faster, it is more efficient. I actually feel safer going through intersections because, especially if I'm on the street going through an intersection, I can go through a little bit faster.
Yep.
And feel a little bit more responsive, because there have been times on my regular bike where cars have nearly clipped
You feel
me.
like a sitting duck
Exactly.
when you're like pedaling through
That's
if it's uphill or something
Exactly.
like that.
Yeah. Yep. So it's been nice for that, and I have shaved 5 minutes off of my work commute. I can get from my house to downtown in about the
Nice.
same time it takes to drive and park. So all around, I think it's a big win, and I don't arrive to places quite as tired and out of breath, which is also good. And I still get exercise because I'm still pedaling the whole time.
That's amazing. So one of the things I learned about e-bikes was I penciled out the electricity usage, and a typical battery has 650 kilowatt hours, something between that and a kilowatt hour. And if you look at your Excel energy bill, it's less than 20 cents per kilowatt hour. So the energy savings compared to like what you put in your car to drive the same amount is really phenomenal. So anyways, have you been able to reduce the number of cars that you own yet? Or
Well, we actually, since we came to Boulder in 2005, we have just been a one-car household.
Nice.
So we've really stuck to that, with the idea that if we were living close, if we were privileged enough to live close to where we work, and to have this great bus system, we really ought to be able to make it on just one car. And there are many days that are across the last 18 years where our car just sits around and we don't have to use it. Even when my husband was working at the University of Denver, he would take the bus and then ride his bike from downtown to campus, just to avoid having to drive in the traffic and everything. So
well, you're so close to the Flatiron Flyer.
no, exactly.
Table
Yeah.
Mesa parking lot. That's
Which
great.
was all this was, intentional. We were fortunate to, find a house that we could afford that was half a mile from some pretty major bus stops.
And when did you buy the house?
It was in 2009. So
2009.
actually we've just passed our 14-year anniversary of being in this house. So
Do you ever look on Zillow and wonder if you could afford it now?
Oh,
if you
there's no
had
way
to-
we could afford it now. There's
Yeah.
absolutely no way.
Yeah.
There's no way. It was a really neat time, and honestly, we couldn't even afford it then. The reason that we were able to purchase that house, and at the time it was under $400,000, which was our budget, but we had not been able to save enough money for a down payment. We had a child in childcare for years, which is more than rent. Often, if you have a child in full-time childcare, and especially with another on the way, we were looking at having a double rent payment plus actual rent every month just to pay for childcare so that we could continue working. So I had reached out to my uncle, who's still in Luxembourg. He's lived there his entire life, and very, very close to where he and my mom grew up. And he had worked a union job as a railroad worker his entire life. Had married once but never had kids, was divorced, and didn't really have anybody that he needed to help support. And over there you get a pretty decent pension. So we asked him if he would loan us money for a down payment, and he said, "You know what? I don't need this. You can have it, and then you don't have to worry about paying me back."
Wow.
Which was an immense gift, and one that most working families do not have access to.
Yeah.
So that was how we were able to afford a house. I think without that, I mean, maybe now, as we're approaching 50, we might have been able to afford a small condo or something like that, but we could not have done it without that. And it's part of the reason why I feel very passionate about just giving people money for down payments rather than putting constraints on that payment, because we have been able to do so much as we have advanced in our careers, give back to the community, because we were able to be here and stay here.
Yeah.
And it's not that, it was easy, even with a relatively stable payment. With 2 kids in childcare, there were many months where we were bouncing our expenses around our credit cards, opening up new credit cards, taking out second mortgages in our home, but we had that initial equity in our home that we could pull from when things got hard, until we got through that point where we didn't have to pay for childcare anymore. And then we could start getting to a point of more financial sustainability in an expensive community like Boulder.
Yeah.
But it was really that without that gift, we probably would not be here.
Well, I think it's a really nice story because this role kind of demands empathy for people struggling with housing, because housing is on everyone's minds right now. And so thank you for sharing that. I think I covered with Bob about the down payment assistance plan recently, so I don't really want to dive into that if that's okay. One of the subjects that feels very kind of top of mind for me with respect to your candidacy in particular is as it relates to homelessness. And I would say that, well, maybe I should just give you an open-ended chance to just, explain your position on homelessness. I think one of the key aspects has to do with the camping ban and whether you support it or not. And at the Raucous Caucus, I think, actually I don't remember now how that came out, but I'm pretty sure that both Bob and Aaron support the camping ban and will continue that, and you don't. And so that would be definitely one thing I would like to have explained to me. But yeah, maybe more broadly, the homeless crisis.
Sure. Yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it. And I think, the camping ban is something that there's a lot of division about in the community, and it is something that comes up often. And I just want to be frank that I don't see an end to the camping ban in sight for many years. So, so I will just sort of put that out there that, we all have the pie in the sky. I wish that things could be a way that they are. And I think the reality is that that's not something that will be overturned, or frankly is even at risk of being overturned. There are not 5 votes on council to send us in a different direction on that. The reasons that I don't view it as one of the more helpful ways to put money into addressing our homelessness crisis. And when we're talking about homelessness in regard to the camping ban, I think what we're talking about is unsheltered homelessness, which is one small sort of one of the worst aspects of how homelessness manifests in our community, or one of the most visible, let me say it that way. It's one of the most visible ways that homelessness manifests in our community. But we really are just talking about a small piece of the homelessness pie when we're talking about the folks who are living in unsanctioned camps. And so, the reason that it's not my preferred method of investing in homelessness solutions is because if you look at the research, there's no evidence that it actually leads to reductions in homelessness. Generally, what it's doing is moving people around from one location to another. There's some recent research that came out of Anschutz earlier this year, in April, I believe, that made the news rounds in the area, and what they showed was what I think a lot of folks who work with people who are living on the streets already understood, which is that experience of moving people around, of not allowing them access to services that they get used to. Let me say that a different way. When you're moving people around, it is hard for service providers to keep track of where people are, which then makes it harder to connect with services. When you are incentivizing people to choose more out-of-the-way locations, they are putting themselves in riskier situations. So I think we all remember the heartbreak of learning about Jessica Aldama's death after having a stillborn baby in a field in a relatively isolated area. She then died of sepsis.
That was shortly after she was moved.
That's right. Yeah. She had an interaction, I believe, with I don't know. I don't remember who she had an interaction with. So
yeah.
If we could not,
yeah.
I don't want to say something that's not true.
Yeah.
But just a couple weeks ago, there was a disabled woman that I got to know a bit while I was volunteering at Feet Forward. She came many weeks. She'd been homeless in Boulder for years, and she was my age, so middle-aged, and a mother as well. A few years ago, an outreach worker had found her in her tent, unable to move because she had had a stroke. She had been there for 16 hours without being able to connect with anybody, without being able to connect with medical services. She, most of the time that I knew her over the last couple of years, she was in a wheelchair. Just recently, she had been able to walk again, which had been a dream of hers. Mm-hmm. She was using a cane. A couple nights ago, I went with some folks in a memorial service for her, and we walked to the place where she had been camping. It was a little ways west along the creek path, and it was at a particularly steep spot, relatively high up from the creek. The area that she was in was fairly small, probably just about big enough for a little tent.
Did you say west of downtown?
West of downtown, yep. Yeah, west of the Justice Center.
Yeah.
And folks think what likely happened was that she had gotten up and either tripped or stumbled and fell down into the creek. She was found maybe 400 feet downstream in very serious condition up against a rock. Another member of the homeless community found her, called emergency services. They were able to get her out, take her to the hospital, but she did not survive. And that's what the research shows, that areas that have these types of camping bans, that have these programs where we are really just moving people along because we don't have any place for them to go, see up to a 25% increase in deaths over the course of 10 years. And we are a very compassionate community. I think if there were anything that you or I were doing in our lives that led to a 25% increase in the rate of death over the course of a decade, we probably wouldn't do that, right? If we found out that people with e-bikes have a 25% higher rate of dying within a decade, that would probably not be the direction that our community goes in. So for me, it's a matter of where we're spending our money and what has the best outcomes, not just for the people who are experiencing homelessness, but for the whole community. And we're going to start talking about our budget for next year in the next couple months. But the initial numbers, we're looking at us going up to maybe $4 million a year that we're spending just on the encampment cleanups, which really just moves people from one place to another where we have to clean up over and over again. And I would like to think that we could find some more cost-effective solutions for getting people off the streets if we were investing $4 million a year. So for me, it's really, where are we directing our resources, and are we putting them in the place that science and evidence tells us is going to have the biggest impact at addressing what we all want to see, which is to not have people living in our public spaces.
Yeah.
But again, I don't
This is
don't
an
see
issue that's really difficult for me because I kind of like hold two truths in my brain at once. Not at once, at different times, you know. And when I hear you say what you just said, I can't help but agree and want to be supportive of that. When I hear other people talk about why we can't have people in the camping in our public spaces right now, and we need to continue the camping ban, I have the same kind of logic of like, well, of course I feel that way too, you know.
Right.
And it's a very like, and then on top of that, like, I have my own emotional reactions to seeing people on the creek. Sometimes it makes me angry. Sometimes it makes me feel like, you know, well, I'm someone who advocates for biking and walking, and I feel like encampments are kind of hostile to that.
That's right.
To encouraging people to bike and walk, and then I live with people who feel threatened by camping, and so that's not even a question. It's just a statement of like, it's a difficult subject for me to wrap my head around.
It absolutely is, and I do not mean to diminish how fearful it is to have people experiencing a mental health or addiction crisis.
Yeah.
I know that people have been, you know, harassed. I know that it is a situation that is unsafe for everyone involved, and I think that this is what we as a community really need to get to, as a place where we can hold multiple truths and recognize that it doesn't mean that my truth does not diminish your truth. We can feel unsafe. We can recognize that that bike paths are not appropriate places for people to live. We can recognize that there should not be propane tanks exploding next to our schools. All of that is true. And I think that, you know, sometimes when we think about the issue of unsheltered homelessness with just one piece of with just one kind of approach, it's really hard for us to expand our vision a little bit and recognize how everything is interconnected, and that in my ideal situation, you know, we would have enough funding for sober supported transitional housing. We would have enough funding to have a space that people could go to for inpatient treatment for mental illness, for addiction beyond meth, because we are opening up some new, well, we, the city, are not, we're partnering with a group that is some treatment facilities for people who are dealing with meth addiction. All of these things are part of the solution, and there is no one thing that is going to end unsheltered homelessness, nor is there one thing that is going to, you know, suddenly make people stop camping along our creek. That these issues are complex, and so are the solutions.
Can I ask one question about the studies showing that it's not an effective way of helping helping resolve homelessness? One of the things I've wondered about, well, I'm actually just kind of curious. Are there cities that don't have camping bans, where they just let them camp, and what happens there? I mean, because to me it would seem like there'd be a certain amount of even more takeover, so to speak, where encampments would grow and you would have more hazard related to the public space that they take up.
Right. No, absolutely. And there are other cities that do not have camping bans. Some of the cities along the West Coast do not. And, you know, I think whether you have camping bans or not, it doesn't change the fact that the people who are living on the street have nowhere to go. If they had somewhere to go, they would not be living on the street. And I think that is just a hard truth that we have to understand. It does not mean, if you have a camping ban, that all of a sudden the population of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness is going to, you know, triple or quadruple. Camping bans don't really relate to homelessness. They don't cause homelessness. They are not anything that really increases or decreases it. Housing and housing costs.
Yeah.
That is the primary driver of homelessness. And by the time that somebody gets to living on the street, every social system, every system that we have set up in our country has failed.
Wow. Well, that's a heavy topic, and thanks for exploring that.
Can I go a little bit deeper on homelessness?
Absolutely.
Because I think
for sure.
that because unsheltered homelessness is so visible, we often are not talking about sheltered homelessness. So these are the people who are staying at the shelter or other spaces in
car,
town, like Mother House, who have a car that they are in, who are maybe couch surfing, who are doubling up, a family, that maybe is doubling up. And, I think recognizing that homelessness goes far beyond the people that we see on the street is one way that we can not just come together a little bit more on this topic as a community, but also recognize how we can work on prevention. Because one of the biggest risk factors for being homeless as an adult is having been homeless as a child.
Yeah.
And so thinking about what are we doing to make sure that as housing costs are increasing, as wages are failing to keep up with just increased cost of living in general, as childcare costs skyrocket, how do we make sure that families have what they need to stay housed? How do we get people out of poverty so that they're not at that precipice to begin with? What are some of the ways that we can work on prevention at the same time that we're dealing with the problem that we have in 2023 of so many decades of failed policies leading to this seemingly growing population of people who are living on our street and don't have the we don't have the resources to provide the level of support that's needed for folks to stay in housing. So I think that's another really critical component that we need to keep in mind. Unsheltered homelessness is the tip of the iceberg, and there is so much else that's there before someone gets to unsheltered homelessness. As we are working on this larger problem of homelessness, we really need to be focused on the prevention strategies and how we are kind of stemming the tide of people who end up unsheltered to begin with. And I just as an example, last year, just in Boulder, City of Boulder schools, there were almost 300 children who experienced homelessness.
Wow. Well, this brings up a question in my mind that I actually don't know how to ask this without sounding kind of callous somehow, but one of the things I worry about is that the presence of homeless people in encampments and public spaces increases the resentment towards homeless people more generally, which could negatively affect the rest of the iceberg, so to speak. And I struggle with I want to be helpful to everyone, but there's kind of an aspect of it where it feels unfair to the rest of the iceberg that the top gets so much attention and can cause negative harm to the rest of it.
Absolutely. It absolutely is. And I think as an example of that, the Emergency Family Assistance Association, an organization doing absolutely incredible work to help families in our community, to help them stay housed, to make sure that they have food, that they can pay their bills. They have been trying for probably 6 or 7 years to get City Council to talk about family homelessness. And EFA was an organization that I was familiar with for quite some time. In fact, when my oldest child turned 5, they really wanted to help the kids in their school that didn't have enough food to eat. And so rather than birthday presents that year, they asked for donations to EFA, and we went and did that. So it's an organization that I really value the work that they do in our community. But the fact that we hadn't even talked about it as a council for so long as more than unsheltered homelessness. It really does speak to that. It's the unsheltered homelessness, I think, gets the attention, but there's so many groups in our community that are trying to prevent people from getting to unsheltered homelessness. It does sometimes steal the air from the room. And, you know, it is the most visible. It is the hardest of everything. And I also hope that we can figure out how to walk and chew gum at the same time, because we really do have to be looking toward what are the solutions to the issues that we're facing now, and what are the things that we can start doing now that are going to make sure that us and, you know, whoever is in our seats in 30 or 40 years has what they need. I think it's a really important way to start looking at how we are making decisions and what we're listening to.
So a couple of years ago, I remember hearing the number, and I repeated it a few times, of like 700 people in Boulder County, the entire county, and on any given night might be unsheltered. Is that still the tip of the iceberg of what we're talking about? So like the number of people who are homeless but sheltered is far greater than that? Is that accurate?
That's a really good question, and I don't... so usually typically that number comes from the point in time count that the county does. And when they get that number, not only are they kind of counting the people that they find outside, not connected in with a shelter, they're also counting the people at the shelter as well. So, so I don't know off the top of my head probably if I have seen the numbers for this point in time, for our most recent point in time count. It was really challenging during the pandemic to get kind of an accurate count. So I expect that probably as we move forward in the next couple of years, we'll start to get a better sense of where we are at. But, you know, I look at rates of eviction and how they have skyrocketed, especially the last 6 or 7 months. I look at a place like EFA that runs a food bank where they have gone from seeing maybe 350 individuals a week in their highest point to just in the last 6 or 7 months seeing over 600 individuals every week.
They serve Boulder County or just Boulder?
They do serve Boulder County, yep. Yeah, and they're just one of
right.
a handful of food banks that are helping to serve Boulder County. It's really, I mean, the need is striking, and I'm hearing more reports of families that are doubling up because they, one of them lost their housing, which can work for a little while, but not that long, especially since the folks who are at most risk of losing their housing are often living in smaller spaces to begin with. So it really, I do not see this getting better anytime in the near future, just because the problem of income inequality and income or economic injustice, it's not getting better. And that fundamentally, to me, is where the root of a lot of this begins.
Yeah. I've explored this a couple different times, and I still have kind of vague ideas about it, but I just throw this out there anyways. I feel like there's an opportunity to flip this narrative on its head, to say that there's an income inequality, but we also say in the same breath, we say there's like inelastic demand. There's so much demand. People want to live here. They're willing to spend lots of money to get here. The housing prices reflect this. And there's this kind of weird disconnect between like there's like almost an infinite amount of money of people willing to spend to come live here, which is reflected in the housing prices. And then there's like this great need that we have to help people who are homeless or on the edge of homelessness or just struggling through poverty. And I want to figure out how to flip these two things, which are both framed as problems, as like maybe there's a way to connect these two things somehow.
Right. Yeah. No, I think, I mean, they are really interconnected, and I think this is we are living in really hard times, and there are some really big and complex problems that we have, and those are also the places where we have the most opportunity for really transformative change. And I think that, the more that we are able to think about where is the unbalance right now, how might it be corrected in not overnight, because nothing changes
perhaps
overnight.
The mayor of Boulder
but over decades.
can't solve that by herself.
No, absolutely not. It really will take all of us, and I think that that's why it's really important for council to start thinking about where are the places that we all can start to come together. Maybe not all, because I don't know that we can ever really get to all, but where are places where we can come together? For me, those places are around affordable housing, recognizing that, even if the folks who can afford to pay $1.5 million for a home here in Boulder are coming and spending that kind of money to be here, unless we can keep the workers here, unless we can keep the teachers and the firefighters and all the folks who keep our city running here in Boulder, it's not actually going to be the greatest place to live. It's going to basically just be a community of expensive homes where you have to go to Longmont or Louisville or Superior to get your groceries. So I think it is an issue that everyone recognizes, because just about all of us have somebody in our lives that's struggling to keep up with housing costs right now. And I think another area where we can really come together as a community is around recognizing the dire need for better behavioral health services, and starting to recognize that nobody seems to be coming to save us. The county is not coming to save us. The state is not coming to save us. The federal government is not coming to save us. And as we are looking toward our growing mental health crisis, to add to the many crises that we already have going on, I think that again, that the place where you tend to see the first impacts are on the most vulnerable people in our community. And right now, a lot of those, it's children. And it's the people who are living on our streets. I think those are some of the most acutely vulnerable people in our community right now. And we are seeing what happens with not having services. I think many families that even have the resources to try to find mental health services for their children, there are often huge wait lists. It was just last year, I believe, that Children's Hospital declared a pediatric mental health emergency because they did not have enough beds for the number of children who were coming in needing more serious support, right? And so, I think we have to look at this, and we can just sort of follow the example of the folks who are living along our creek or in these encampments along our multi-use paths. They may get a ticket. They may be taken to jail for fighting or something like that. They may stay there for a bit of time. Maybe they get sober. Maybe they get a little bit of support there, but that doesn't last for very long. Most folks who stay in the jail are there for maybe a week. When they come out, we have no place for them to go, literally no place for them to go. We do not have any kind of transitional housing or place where they could go to
Do we know where they go?
Support.
They walk
They
out
go
the
back
door
to the
and,
street.
Yeah.
They go right back to the street because there are no other options. And that's something that I think we need to recognize too, that we don't have the resources that we need to give people the support that they need. And so what are we going to do about that? You may have seen, there was a poll that the city did as we were looking at voters' opinions about renewing this 0.15% sales tax. We just got the results a couple weeks ago, or actually it was just last week. And one of the places that people were interested in seeing more investment of city, but basically where they were interested in seeing more spending was in supportive services for people who are experiencing homelessness. Some of the things that came up as the biggest issues that people were concerned about in the community. I should clarify, this was a poll of likely voters, so the demographics of this poll did not match the community as a whole. It matched the community of people who typically vote in odd-year elections. So, you know, it is in some sense not fully representative, and what people were noting as the highest concerns were affordable housing, support and services for people who are experiencing homelessness, behavioral health care and mental health supports, and public safety, which included a broad range, not just police, but also fire support, emergency medical support, those kinds of things that can help us in emergencies. So I think there is a lot of support for that, and I would love to try to figure out how we can get more funding to develop our own behavioral health support services if we cannot get services from the county and the state and the federal government to do that.
Yeah, I would think that when the federal government looks at a map of the U.S., they don't necessarily think of Boulder as being the epicenter of the mental health crisis that's going on in our country. So like to your point about the feds are probably not, you know, like we're not on the short list for them helping us, I would guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, this isn't just Boulder. Boulder is a microcosm of the rest of the country. Yeah. Everybody is dealing with these issues right now because most of us are not well in this world. And so how do we start to create more of a community where more of us can thrive, where we have the social supports, the connection, where we have the emotional and physical safety, where our basic needs are met? Because those are the kinds of things that, you know, we know reduce stress. And we have the wonderful therapeutic outdoors here in Boulder too. We have all the components that we need. We really just need to think about how can we be moving our spending in a way that it is really geared toward the highest impact programs, that it will create this elevated wellness for all of us. One of the things that I geek out on this a little bit. It's not something that most people get very excited about, but I love budgets. I absolutely love budgets.
I remember this, yes.
And one of the amazing things that we're doing as a city, and this has been a work in progress for a few years now, and we have probably 2 to 3 more years of work to go until we're fully there, we're moving toward outcomes-based budgeting. So previously, we really weren't keeping track on what is it that we're trying to do with the money that we're spending in a really holistic way across the whole city. And so we've been reshaping our budget around this sustainability, equity, and resilience framework, where every department is now linking their spending in to these overarching goals and aspects of what we're trying to achieve with how we spend our money in the city. Starting this year, departments will begin the process of coming up with some key performance indicators for their budget items. So if they have a program, looking at what are the goals of that program, and is this program achieving those goals? So that when we look at the budget across the entire city, across all the departments, not only do we have a sense of what types of issues departments are spending money on across departments. So something like homelessness and unsheltered homelessness involves many different departments contributing to that effort. We don't really have a sense of how much money in total is being spent on that. We will in the coming years. And we'll also have a sense of which programs are having the biggest impact for the money that we're spending on them. And so I think it really will help us get better at using our money more efficiently, and that way hopefully we won't have to do as much raising taxes and that kind of thing, because we're really moving things around rather than adding to a pot. We're becoming more efficient before we get to a point of thinking about what else do we need.
I have, this raises red flags in my brain when I hear people talk about, oh, we're gonna add more metrics and measure things better. It's especially when it comes to budget. Like there's, because, you know, I hear stories of different people in different organizations where, you know, the budget becomes such a focus that it's almost like you can't do anything without moving, because like there's this regulation and that regulation, and there's like this compliance, and you have to make these reports, and so like just on the surface, it doesn't make me hope. It kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies of that you want to like add this kind of framework. So maybe give me a little hope. How does the rubber hit the road where this actually doesn't just become burdensome on staff, but actually helps inform policymakers?
Sure. Yeah. Well, how exactly council, you know, will get information to make decisions in this way, I think is something that we will learn
Okay.
in the next council. But one of the things that I think will be really good is that it also gives departments a chance to, you know, look at how are we spending our money? What is going to things that, you know, we maybe that's an outdated way of doing things, and there's a new way that, you know, we could try. I mean, sometimes having those metrics of whether or not you're actually achieving the things that you set out to achieve can be helpful. You know, even at an individual level, definitely at a departmental level. I think, you know, I'm trying to think about even in a family budget, right? I guess, you know, you could have a sense of whether you are spending enough money on food based on the hunger level of your growing teenagers, right? They will let you know when you run out of food for them to eat in the house. So, you know, and then you can adjust and say, okay, wow, all right, we're going through a growth spurt, and we're going to have to cut back a little bit on this other area because I'm clearly going to need to spend a little more money on food this next month so that I don't have hangry teenagers running around the house. So I think it's that type of situation where you can have a little more information that then it can inform how you're spending your money, and I think help us really address more emerging needs a little bit faster once we know that they're
I definitely love
goals.
the idea of thorough audits, you know, so that it's more transparency, which I think is super important. Is that part of the discussion?
No, all of this. So we moved to this platform called OpenGov last year when we were doing our budget, and so everything is becoming much more transparent. It becomes much easier for community members, if they want to go and dive deeper into our budget, figure out where is our money coming from, where are we spending it, as we move toward this framework. We're also if people want to know how much we spend on homelessness, for example, they can just go to this website and check and see, oh, okay, this is how much money we're spending, and here are the different departments that are contributing, here are the different programs and in the departments that are working toward that, and they can kind of follow along and start to see where things are effective and where they are not. I think the transparency is really important.
Will this just be strictly for city, or will it also include something like Boulder Housing Partners?
This will just be for the city. So, I mean, it will. One of the things we started including last year in the budget was also money that comes in from outside sources like grants and things like that. That is, that's just sort of.
The reason I bring it up is because I've heard a few little grumblings about, hey, you know, BHP has a very large budget, and are they really being audited at the level of scrutiny that such a large responsibility requires? So I just thought I'd ask and maybe put that on your radar if it's not.
I think, you know, what will be, because they are they're our housing authority, but they're not kind of governed by the city. So this will really just be for city departments and things.
Well, I'd kind of like to just pivot a little bit and ask you an open-ended question of what are you excited about with respect to being the mayor? Is that what is? I assume that maybe you'll get a top hat or something like that.
Key to the city, raise something. You know, I think one of the things that I am really excited about is on the theme of transparency, just trying to make our local government more transparent to people in the community. Really reaching out to folks that typically aren't coming to speak to us at council meetings, making sure that, you know, they know how to just even to attend a meeting and come there. And I've been doing a bit of this over the last year or so, and it has been effective in getting some new people to pay attention to local government, to engage with our meetings and keep track of what it is that we're doing. And one of the things that I am really excited about is just the work of mentoring and kind of helping bring in our next generation of leaders. I'm sure the community has noticed that we seem to be turning over council members quite quickly these days. That is an unfortunate thing for our city. There is definitely benefit in having some folks around who have a little bit more historical, knowledge of how things work. And I think it also is really critical that we start building up that capacity of knowledge in people who haven't typically been represented on council. So talking renters, younger people, workers. So we actually have a few workers now, and we're bringing that perspective of what it's like to be on council and work in the community. BIPOC folks really have not been that represented. Queer and trans folks have not been very represented on council. And to me, that's one of the primary things the mayor can do, is to help foster that culture of mentorship, inclusion, all the things that, hopefully will help bring new people to council, as well as once they get there, keep them engaged in the work, keep them interested, and help them achieve what it is that they set out to do when they get to council as well. There's a passing on of knowledge that I have always enjoyed, and I love that about my role at CU, and just being able to work with a lot of different folks and kind of come together and partner. So I think that is one of the things that I am most excited about, the idea of running for mayor. I think it's also some of the just nitty-gritty kind of boring stuff about meeting efficiency and, how do you keep discussions on track. You have a permanent seat on our council agenda committee, which doesn't mean that you get to exclude your colleagues who have things that they're interested in speaking to. It also means that, you can help shape how much time is allocated to different discussions, help ensure that staff has what they need in order to get the information from council that they need. And there is that aspect of meeting facilitation is a really fun one, because it doesn't mean you get to be the person talking all the time. And I will just say there are probably some folks who would appreciate seeing me in that role for that very reason. But
it'll make meetings more interesting. You'll be on your toes a little bit more.
Right. Well, and it's sort of a facilitating of ideas coming together, and making sure that everybody has space to say what it is that they want to say, making sure that there's time for a robust discussion without getting too off track, so that meetings go much late. Because I think one of the things I advocated for to get on this work plan that didn't quite make it, but we're starting on it already, is to have council paid a living wage.
Yes.
I think that is essential to getting a more diverse group of people on council. One of the other things that we can do is to lighten the load a little bit. We should not be the micromanagers of the city. Our staff are exceptional. They are very capable, and they are the people on the front lines of all this work. So a lot of it is really setting the direction, and then letting staff figure out how to carry out the things that we are interested in achieving. And we get to council because we have a lot of opinions on things, and we really like to talk and discuss issues as completely as possible. And I think to make the work a more reasonable lift for a lot of the people that I think should be on council, a lot of the perspectives that I think need to be represented, we have to become a little bit more efficient.
Yeah. So I had heard that the livable wage didn't make it to the top of the queue because there was some pushback with respect to, well, hey, instead of paying livable wage, we could probably get by with reducing the demanding hours of city council, which feels like kind of a lame dodge to me. Like, I don't remember. I'm sorry, I'm going to have troubles naming anyone who might have had that position. I know where to go look to read about that, but I really hope that city council will make that a priority, because it really. I mean, if you were to just do like a survey of all past city council people, like either what was your reason for not running again, is like, the cost benefit of like how much time you spend and what you get paid and how much financial sacrifice that means, or just the fact that like you are in a position where you happen to retire early and you have all this time and you want to be community servant, which I think is great, but
no, it is. It really has to be both. It cannot just be one, in my mind. That and I feel this way very strongly about labor in general. You should be paid for your work, period, and not just paid, as we are, about $1,000 a month for what amounts to probably 30 hours of work a week.
So when you say livable wage, the thing that pops into my head, I'm sorry about the sun in your eyes. I noticed the clouds have been coming and going. I think of what Fort Collins did, where they're like 50% AMI, something like that, which to me seems like not like a great start, but maybe not quite enough. I mean, this is a professional role that we require. There's an incredible filtering process that is going to bring talent to the top, and seems like they should get treated like professionals. And I would also include they should have a paid staff to help them. So I agree. I mean, in Denver, their city council people get paid 6 figures, and they have a staff person. Nice.
So it really does increase what you can do. Now we do have a different style of government. So we have a weak mayor and a weak council and a strong city manager form of government. We have well over 1,000 staff that help keep our city running, and for the time that we put in, having a wage that lets you live in Boulder really opens up who can be on council. Because if you're a single parent, it's going to be really hard for you to be on council.
Should we really have such a strong woman be a weak mayor?
Thank you, Philip. Yeah, no, and this is the other part that I think, is exciting for me. This is the very first time that Boulder will elect their mayor. As a woman myself, I mean, just sort of sitting outside of Nicole as the candidate who's going to be running for mayor, how exciting to see that a queer woman is throwing herself in the mix for this, a parent, a worker. It really, I think, opens up a world of possibility that I hope, win or lose, will inspire whoever comes next. Because I don't want this to be a race where there's no woman.
Right.
It's our very first one, and I really want people in Boulder to recognize that the possibilities are endless for who we can have as our mayor. It does not have to be just one type of person, who is often the person most represented in leadership positions. We are one of the most progressive cities in the country. Let's do it. Let's elect a female as our first mayor.
And do we know how many female mayors we've had in the past?
I do actually, in fact, know that statistic. We have had 5 female mayors in the last about 150 years.
Okay.
So relatively recent. There was a stint in, I believe it was the 70s, 80s, early 90s, where we had just a run of female mayors who were kind of reappointed. But yeah, there really haven't been that many.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things to talk about, and there's so many big issues. But you've already given me an hour of your time, I believe. I'm not looking at the time, but is there anything else you'd like to cover, or parting shots, thoughts? I'm happy. I mean, I've got all evening. We could just dive into another topic if you want.
Yeah.
But I know you have something else going on this evening.
I should probably head out soon. I think one of the things that I really hope to show through my campaign is that when we think about dreaming big, and when we think about transforming the current systems and paradigms that we have, we can really get to a place that isn't quite so scary, but is one that is very generative, and where we can begin to create together the future that we want to see for our city. There are so many amazing projects and work that I have seen going on in our community for the last couple of years. In a lot of the places that I show up to as council member Speer, groups have never had a council person come and see them before. And we have amazing leaders in our community. They are within their own communities, creating, imagining, building this whole new world of what's possible. And I really would love to see the next council start to unleash some of the creativity and the spirit and the brilliance of this community. Just as one example, a few months ago, I was able to go and see a new agrivoltaics project up by Gateway.
That's a new word, agrivoltaics, is that what you said?
Yes,
okay.
It is. Honestly, Philip, this is one of the things I am most excited about.
Interesting.
That I have learned in the last couple of years. And what it basically is kind of combining agriculture with solar arrays. So typically you would see a solar array just kind of out there on land that's really not being used. But when you partner with farmers who are looking at regenerative agriculture, ways of not just growing things, but also healing the land, when they're partnering with indigenous communities and people who are the longtime stewards of these lands that we're on, you can really get to some incredible visionary work. So up in North Boulder at this agrivoltaics site, Drylands Agricultural Research is partnering with Flows, and the Nature Conservancy was there. The city is partnering in this too. And they're taking the land that solar array is on and turning it into land that can grow things. It's not just dry dirt and weeds. They were able to look at the land and see how water is distributing itself around the array, how things are growing, where there is sunlight, which places are getting water, and they develop some beds that go in between the arrays of panels. And in those spaces, they are growing plants and herbs that's being used by a local company.
Cool.
to grow plant medicine, as well as just kind of see what else is going to grow out there. But the way that they designed this space for growing wasn't just focused on how can we regenerate the soil, make use of the natural resources that are coming in when the rain and snow and things come land on those solar panels, but it's also now going to be contributing to our community in the form of what's being grown there.
Well, that's very hopeful. It's not intuitive to me at all that that would be a productive possibility. So I'm curious to go see that for myself. I kind of a lot of times despair at the notion we're going to take a space like this and put solar panels all over it. But if we can add some permaculture,
right?
If that's the right word. I don't know if you said regenerative, perhaps.
Yes, yeah. Regenerative agriculture, just sort of focused on restoring the natural balance.
Cool.
Yeah, it's it's really incredible, and starting to think about what would it look like if more neighborhoods had those kinds of spaces, rather than sort of all of this giant open field, we were to use some of it for in a more climate appropriate way, given that we're heading into a hotter and drier climate. For growing some of the food that could then be used in the local community. I think it's part of why we are in the space that we're in and the challenges that we're in is because we have exploited so much of our land, so much of our people and the labor. And the more we can get back to restoring some balance in how we're connected with each other, how we are connected with our natural environment, the better I think we'll be.
Well, that sounds like a closer, perhaps.
Perhaps. Yeah. There is a lot of reason for hope, and the reason for hope is right here in the community and the people that are here at this moment in time and rallying us all together, getting us in alignment on the things that most of us can agree on. That's how we build the Boulder of the future, so that hopefully you and me, 40 years from now, whoever those people are, have a little bit of an easier time than we're having now, despite the escalation of the climate crisis.
Nicole, thank you so much for spending time with me this evening and for coming on the podcast. I will be following your campaign with acute interest, and thank you for your service and for running. I'm just really excited about watching this mayoral race, the first ever mayoral race unfold, and so thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and thank you, Philip, for giving so much to our community through this podcast and helping connect us to each other.
You bet. Gonna find me a residential pedestrian district where I can gracefully grow older. Gonna spend my remaining years sharing Boulder.
Thank you for listening to Sharing Boulder. Please support the podcast by sharing it with your friends and neighbors. You can contact me at linktree.com/PhilipOgren, which you can find by DuckDuckGoing Linktree Philip Ogren, or by visiting sharingboulder.us, where you can also find show notes and previous episodes. This episode of Sharing Boulder was produced by Philip Ogren, and the music was created by Nathaniel Ogren and Sack Lunch. Keep sharing, Boulder.